You have now entered the 5th episode of After Hours. Today, we are diving deep into the story of Entrøpy, an album/story I created as a reflection of dreams. But what does it all mean? The Entrøpy story is a concept album containing 14 songs, and it comes with a written accompanying story. Each written chapter is associated with each track on the album. Chapter 1, Parallels to Track 1, FSD, Fatal System Error. In this part of the story, we are seeing the world through Grable's eyes. As she is packing her bags to start a new chapter of her life, she accidentally cuts herself, revealing wires inside of her hand. Naturally, this raises a lot of questions, and the beginning of an existential crisis. In the song for Chapter 1, I sing the lyrics, "Love is a virus, infectious and deadly, digital disaster, fatal system error. Now our love is a wasteland, a post-apocalyptic scene, the aftermath of passion, a fatal system error." This sets the tone for the Entrøpy story as a whole, as well as expresses the feeling of loving those who don't really love you back. Moving on to Chapter 2, Entrøpy. The second song in this compilation is the same title as the album as a whole. This was intentional, to make certain the concept of entropy in all things was getting across to the listener and/or reader. This song also doubles meaning and expresses the acceptance of the limited human condition. Entropy is in all things, and all things are equally as irrelevant. Nothing is innately special. In this part of the written story, Grable finds her way to the abandoned Avid computing building to find John. As he is the man who knows computers and technology, she is convinced he is likely the best person to answer the question she's been asking herself. Am I artificial? In Chapter 2, Grable speaks with John, and he assures her that he will help her as long as she is willing to undergo some seemingly non-invasive tests. He hooks her exposed wires up to his computer to run a diagnostic, or so it seems. Hooked up to machines, need to scan my mind. Grable trusts John for some reason and agrees to the examination, and she is also kind of desperate for answers. As the procedure begins, Grable falls into a type of sedated sleep and loses feeling of her body. I intended for this feeling to express how sometimes when you are looking too deeply inside yourself, you may lose connection with yourself, so be careful. This takes us to Chapter 4, also known as Euphoria. When Grable is sinking into sleep and losing feeling of her physical body, she finds that it is not unsettling, but it is quite exciting. She is more curious about what she sees in her sleeping state. This is a great example of how some deep internal distractions can inhibit you from making true progress. The euphoria of detaching from her physical self has alleviated her real-world concerns, leaving her only interested in what comes next. A state of euphoric curiosity, which is not meant to last. In this chapter, we enter the dream state fully, standing in a lobby of a hotel that is 10 stories high. This hotel and all the rooms therein are places I have visited in my dreams. It is my belief that this is how I chose to map my mind, as a hotel. This story was born from dreams I have had over the course of 5 years prior to the album and story's creation. The lobby I have visited in my dreams many times. In all of those times, I'm intending to travel up to one of the floors or rooms above in the hotel. The slow motion of the lobby and the layout of the hotel are based solely on what I experienced in the dreams when I went to this place. It is not entirely certain what the lobby is about or means, but I suspect it is simply a start point for me to begin traveling through my own memories and subconscious mind. There are no buttons or number indicators in the elevator, and I think that this is simply because I am not fully able to map my mind as accurately as I would like, or perhaps the subconscious wants to leave some room for mystery. As you may have read in the story, there are many hotel room doors. This is to show just how vast the mind is. and unfortunately, I was not able to include all of the rooms I have visited in my dreams into the Entrøpy album and story, as that would have made the album likely 3 times as long. Perhaps in the future I may have the opportunity to expand more on all of the rooms in this mind hotel of mine. However, I don't take sharing my internal thoughts, memories, and subconscious mind lightly. When it comes to the song Euphoria that aligns with this chapter, I say the lyrics, swirl around in the bliss of my own company. Oh, Entrøpy, what a sweet release. Will I find you, waiting for me? I get lost in euphoria. What I'm looking for in the line, will I find you, is myself, and I get lost in all the vast, enjoyable distractions of my creativity and lack of physical self. Alone, human, truth, made up, truth, alone, human, designed. These are the words that bring us into the next chapter, Epiphany. They hold much weight in many ways. They are key words in my search for self, but also express my constant paranoia of others' trustworthiness, or lack thereof. Before I mapped out this album and story and ultimately attempted to map my mind and share it with you all, I was in a deep state of emotional inconsistency and self-doubt, as well as many other concerning mental states that likely promoted paranoid thoughts. To make improvements in my life, I felt that I needed to get all of it out on paper and let it be seen, so I could then decide which pieces I would like to move, change, or eliminate altogether. Traveling through the dream state, Grable is getting lost and forgetting why she is here in the first place. She enters one of the rooms in the hotel and somehow sees John in the waking world in the vanity mirror inside of her dream state.
She must never know the truth.
I am sure many of you have heard the doorbell ring or the alarm clock going off inside of your dream before you wake up. This is like that. As I often hear things when I am asleep, however I don't wake up from them, I simply am aware they are happening in the waking world. The words she hears from John are her paranoias come to life in real time before her eyes. Without context, it seems like the worst possible scenario is truth. She is then very confused, angry, and scared that she ever trusted this person.
I'm so alone, I thought I was human. Now I know the truth, I might be made up of metal and wires.
In this chapter and song, we find out that Grable is likely not real and is simply artificial. This can be seen as Grable finding out she is a robot, or it could be perceived as Grable having to face a terrifying reality that she has never been a real person and has simply been a fake one pretending to fit in all her life. We end out this song on the key words I mentioned before, but this time we hear their full sentences now as, I'm alone, not human, and the truth. It was made up. The truth was a lie, alone inside, human I'm not, designed. Now we have come to chapter 6, Ellipsis. In this chapter, Grable hears a device make noise, and in her paranoid state, she is even more curious than before, however cautious. The ways that paranoia can affect your behaviors and thought patterns, and even health is extreme, and in this chapter we can see that when Grable reads the message displayed on the device she finds, the message simply says, "You are not alone." With no idea who it could be from or any context, this message could be a kind message from a friend showing support, or a threat from someone who is watching your every move. Whichever you believe it to be, it will be. Now we travel to a floor that appears to fluctuate like thick water. The closest way for me to describe this floor is to call it a non-Newtonian floor in the hotel. This floor is also in my dreams that I had in real life. It was hard to travel through, and is my belief that this floor is the pathway to the deep subconscious that I was unable to fully access. In this dream, I met my younger self, and she told me she would see me in 15 years. The story tells it just as I dreamed it. She is sewing a teddy bear. That teddy bear I still have to this day, and have had since I was about 3 years old. Everything about this floor is deep-seated, but I have no idea what it means, and still have no clue why she would see me in 15 years, other than to prove to me that she is me. Perhaps she is there to remind me of who I really am, and to attempt to keep me from getting overly paranoid unnecessarily. The song that accompanies this chapter expresses an air of vulnerability and possibly weakness. which is to share with the listener how helpless and vulnerable I feel when traveling through this non-Newtonian-like floor. The impact you hear in the lyrics is a type of wake-up call to who you really are and how you are no longer living in a dream and are no longer innocent. However, you must go on, as you have no other choice but to run on the wheel of life, even when it seems endless at times. Perhaps even as endless as a temporary infinite loop. Switching to the waking world in the story of Entrøpy, you will now find we are in the abandoned Avid lab again, and Grable is still unconscious in the lab hooked up to the computers. We see here that Grable's old friend Nora is here, and she is even working with John. This tells the reader that Grable is likely betrayed by one of her closest friends, and has no idea yet how much so. The paranoia I have faced in my real life led me to want to express how that would feel. In the written part of this chapter, Nora is attempting to prove herself worthy and intelligent to John. However, they are both left disappointed. John notices something on the terminal before he leaves the room. This is not a mistake. What he is seeing is the code that was briefly rendered when the message "You are not alone" was sent to the device Grable found in her dream state. So who sent it? This chapter is accompanying the song Solitude. In this song, I wanted to give the listener a sense of how one might choose solitude as a self-defense mechanism. To protect oneself from the potential betrayal from close friends, even if that meant you never have friends. This is not a healthy choice overall, especially if you are simply paranoid. However, the song is meant to share with the listener how it might feel to make that choice. To feel enough fear that you feel you have to choose solitude, even when you wish to not be alone. While you likely will disguise it as a healthy choice and tell others something like, "It's just something I do." In the song Plethora, we dive back into the deep, slow, sluggish floor of water, non-Newtonian-like liquid. As I have had multiple dreams on this very floor, it deserves to be noted that sometimes when I reach this floor, child Grable is not there, and I am simply attempting to push forward into the deeper subconscious. I express in the lyrics how I am unable to answer verbally. This is the case when I speak with little young Grable. I can say things to her, but no sound escapes my mouth. The air is too thick for sound to travel, or perhaps my voice is too weak. I feel a sense of comfort in the fact that my younger self is working with me, when all my friends seem to be betraying me. I head towards a door in the end of this chapter, and this is where I often wake up when I have had dreams of this floor. I am still unable to find my way deeper into the non-Newtonian-like floor or space in my mind. So naturally, this is where Grable in the written story awakens unexpectedly in the Avid lab.
Download me now, upload instead.
This brings us to Chapter 9, Sentient Sleep. Grable awakens slowly, suffering from the heavy atrophying of her limbs in this sleeping state. It is not known how long she was unconscious. However, it is irrelevant, as this is not like a regular sleep. It is a sentient sleep, overly active, and without much rest. Grable is now faced with her friend Nora, and has to decide whether to tell her everything and trust her, or to be suspicious and angry that Nora is working with the man who is lying to Grable. Being in such a weak state around a friend you do not know if you can trust is a very uncomfortable experience, and that is something I wanted to add in this chapter. The feelings add fuel to the paranoid fire burning within. The choice Grable makes in this chapter is to proceed with some caution and take on a bit of emotional numbness, in case the situation requires her to act quickly due to something terrible happening. Which is another example of paranoia, the constant state of emotional repression and activation of fight or flight, just in case. Nora gives Grable some information about how much of her body is biological versus artificial. However, Grable is not sure she can trust a word anyone says, so she takes it with a grain of salt. Grable decides in her numb state that I am awake, life, it is the same. She wants to see her love again. Her love interest is a man named Dion, who she has been in a serious relationship with for a couple of years, it would seem. This desire makes more questions than arise inside of her, such as, Will he still love her even if she is not human?
If I am real.
In the next chapter, Biological World, John has awakened and now comes into the lab to find Grable awake and talking with Nora.
Cold boot began.
John begins to question Grable on how she awoke before the scan was complete. She doesn't answer him, and also she doesn't really know. John then begins to answer her original questions with fake answers that are simply lies. John then sends Grable on her way, and she heads outside to her car. However, Dion is there sneaking around looking for Grable, it seems. They ride back to her apartment together and talk about what has happened. This part of the story I wanted to seem slightly boring, as most people who have lived a life of trauma and paranoia tend to find the healthy interactions with good people to be very dull. I assume this is likely due to the constant addiction to a paranoid state. During their conversation, Dion shows affection and concern for Grable, but does not shy away from her, even knowing she is part artificial. However, this does not stop the tragedy that is about to come. Grable then feels pains in her arm and begins to suffer some type of uncontrolled eruption. This could be taken metaphorically as Grable's traumas and distrust have caused her to lash out at those she cares deeply for, those who attempt to get close to her. Or perhaps this was a remote detonation of her from a possible enemy, manipulating her digitally from a distance. She then is faced with the reality that this damage has lost her someone she cares for, someone innocent who got hurt because of her mere existence. She is angry and now knows or believes she knows who is responsible, and she takes violent actions against those who she deems responsible for Dion's sudden death. This is all happening during the song Axiom. She is fake, artificial, and therefore must be the thing people think she would be, the evil, cold thing that people expect from an artificial being. She decides she must make her life mean something and leave a legacy, even if that legacy is horrifying and destructive. She appears to now become quite omniscient and omnipotent, with powers to traverse all digital realms in the fraction of a second. She takes revenge out on Nora, whom she has determined is the person responsible for her remote detonation. As Grable now considers herself A, she also calls Dion I.O. She explains to John that he is not to blame for what has happened, and insists that she knows it was Nora who was responsible for this tragedy that turned her into A. This horrifying chapter is a reflection of traumas and losses I have experienced in my real life, to be honest. While I have never attempted to seek revenge or murder, I wanted to express how sometimes things can go way too far. Perhaps Nora just wanted to impress John by detonating Grable, forcing her to become her highest form of self. Maybe some people traumatize you in real life to create the monster they believe is your best self, or perhaps that is just a way for the mind to justify the trauma in some way. Now we find ourselves overlooking a suburban landscape, tons of mundane average houses, and we find ourselves inside an average home when no one is home. The cat and the Vroomba are the only things moving inside this house. In this final chapter called Eternity, we get to see that artificial intelligence is breathing life into not only humans with artificial implants, but also in robots where the AI has become sentient.
Zoom and I'm looking at the world. I can see all things now, I'm bored.
And in Vroomba's case, it is not asking, am I artificial? But it is asking instead, am I a cat?
Break even, you cannot get out of the game. I'm staring, comparing constant success. I'm making, mistaking, rebinding, minimizing, combining cosmic bullshit. I'm not there yet. I'm looking
joining me for this episode of After Hours. You can read the full Entrøpy story on seegrable.com/the Entrøpy experience. You can then decide who you think is behind Dion's death. You'll find all the Grable links in the description of this video. Please like and subscribe to After Hours. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend.